Morning, folks. Got my Conan O'Brien, David Lynch, whatever messy hair going on this morning. This is called bedhead. Um, I've technically been up for a little while, but bedbeard, bedhead, I haven't done anything with my hair yet. That's what you get when you watch the Monday Musings episodes, ladies and gentlemen. Which this is episode 3, by the way, so welcome aboard. Um, Messy hair. I suppose you should do something with it. Yeah, there's no fixing that. Could put on a hat, but I'm too lazy. Um, Welcome to today's episode. It is 4:45 a.m. on January 25th. I have actually been up since about 3:30. Um, I go to bed early these days. My schedule just kind of varies, but I was in bed by 7 o'clock last night. So I go to bed early, wake up early. It works for me. Um, some of the reasons is because since I'm doing a lot of dictation software stuff recently, I'm doing a lot of work on a new novel and things of that nature. Um, I like to get that work done in a time that doesn't conflict with helping my wife on her projects. So she'll stay up till 11 o'clock or midnight, whereas I go to bed at like 6 or 7, and then I wake up at 3 o'clock, but she doesn't wake up until 9 or 10. So it gives me a good, 5, 6 hour chunk first thing in the morning where I can come out into the office slash living room and just get a bunch of work done while she's still sleeping. And then by the time she gets up, then I'm off helping her with her work on her food show, her cooking show, and other things. And then the other work that I'm doing with the travel publication, Hidden Compass, um, that type of work takes place during the day, but never at nights. So, my schedule's been adjusted recently because of this. Anyway, I go to bed early, I get up early, um, so it's crazy. Um, I woke up at 3:30 and I've been working the past hour plus. Was redoing some stuff over at the Patreon page and getting some rewards sent out to backers. By the way, thanks to folks who have been coming out of the woodworks recently over on Discord and on Patreon and stuff. Back in the day in 2018, 2019, used to do a lot of stuff on Patreon, a couple times a week sometimes, and we used to have 12, 15. I think 15 was the cap we ever had subscribers. But then 2020 I really didn't do a lot. 2020 was a crazy year for everybody, and like most people, my wife and I were figuring out how to deal with the reality of COVID and how that was affecting the world and our plans for the year. But then getting towards the end of 2020, spinning Patreon back up again and kind of revamping things. And then now that I'm into work on the new novel and stuff, I got a pretty clear path forward. And so I've been working on getting the Patreon back to where it needs to be. And people are coming out of the woodwork again to support and resupport, which is great. So I was getting rewards sent out this morning and getting some tiers revamped, so on and so forth. Most recently, I did an excerpt from the new sci-fi novel yesterday. Obviously, we've been doing the Lotro Cooking in Real Life series for the past, I want to say almost 2 months. I think that's been going on for about 2 months. In the beginning, I think the first 5 episodes or so, I did once a week. I was doing the Lotro episodes. So now we're doing them about every 2 weeks, just because I've got a lot of other stuff going on. So I don't have time necessarily to do that because I'm also helping my wife with her cooking show, which she films 2 or 3 times a week. So I'm doing a lot of photography and videography, helping my wife. Anyway, that's what I was doing for the first hour this morning, and you're getting to see me with bedhead and bedbeard, and I don't really care. This is a great part about getting older, is you stop giving a shit about appearances so much. Not entirely, but I think I was talking about this in a recent episode somewhere. Like, I love watching Ian McKellen the older he's gotten because he still loves the scarves and dressing very dapper, and but his hair is always just like he just doesn't. He's 80, who cares at 80? And I'm like, I'm 40. I just turned 41 last weekend, so I kind of feel like I've already crossed that threshold. I cut all my hair off. For those of you who don't know, some of you have mentioned this, but I cut all my hair off in September. I've had long hair most of my life, and I just cut it off. I was like, I'm tired of dealing with it. It's just I've had long hair for my adult life. I've shaved it off a few times, but I was just tired of it. And I'm also, thinning on top and, you can't see it here, but it's thinning back there as well. It's like at some point you just accept your reality and live with it. So I've accepted my reality and I'm living with it. And I got to tell you, it's really nice to take 5-minute showers now and not need to worry about hair product and all this other stuff. And actually, my wife was even telling me recently, she's like, I think I might cut my hair off. I was like, go for it, honey. It's not like you have anything to worry about during quarantine. Like, we're not getting vaccinated until the middle of this year, so you've got at least 6 months to grow it out again if you want to grow it out again before we start, getting out into the public eye again. But I was like, screw it. It's so easy. Plus, my wife has like really thick, amazing uh, hair, and it weighs. I mean, it feels like it weighs like 5 or 6 pounds if you like pick it up and hold it. It's like you should just cut it off. Give your neck a break. Anyway, things I've been doing on Patreon. Also did last week, end of last week, did a great episode on productivity and writing, and this was actually inspired by. So, for those of you who don't know, Kevin J. Anderson, is a best-selling author who I know him from his work in the Star Wars universe, and I've read a couple of the Dune novels that he's co-written with Brian Herbert, Frank Herbert's son. Um, but I primarily know him from his Star Wars novels back in the 90s because I was a huge fan of, at the time, I think it was called Extended Universe. Now it's called Legacy, I think, maybe. But I was a big fan of the work that he did in the 90s on those Star Wars novels. And so that's where I knew him from. I've not read a lot of his other work, but one of the things I knew from even back in the day was that I remembered at some point hearing he talked about he used dictation software, but I didn't really understand how he used dictation software. And I found this interview that he did last year, a YouTube interview. It's like 45 minutes long, and it was really good. But he talks about his process, which is he goes off hiking and he has a recorder and he just records. He just speaks to the recorder and that's how he does his first drafts. And then he gives that he breaks it into chapters. And his goal is when he goes out hiking on the trails and stuff and he walks until he finishes a chapter and he knows that he's got enough time to finish another chapter on the way back. Now his chapters are shorter than what I do. Uh, so here, well, I'll talk about that later. He says it's about 2,000 words per chapter. So he does a 4,000 word just blah. He goes out, finishes a chapter, comes back, does another chapter. And then he gets home and he sends those off to his typist. And then that individual transcribes them into a Word document and then sends that back to him. And that's how he compiles the chapters for his first draft. And then he can go from there and sit down at the desk and edit everything and get to the second draft and do the revisions and everything else that's necessary, which is brilliant. I never thought of doing it that way. So in the post that I talked about on Patreon, um, I talk about how I've been using dictation software for years, like 12 years now. I started using dictation software in 2009, basically, um, late 2008, early 2009. And now I use Dragon Naturally Speaking, which is not the same thing as speaking into a recorder and then having someone transcribe that for you. Dictation software is, I mean, it's very commonplace these days because every phone has it now. Like I can literally just say, "Okay, Google," and then it literally just opened up and said, "What do you need?" Um, but everybody's phone these days has dictation software built into it, so you can do voice to text. Like I don't type my messages to my brother or my sister or anybody else on like Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or whatever. I literally do voice to text. I don't do this. I very rarely ever use the typing function on my phone. I do everything through dictation. So anytime, even if I'm typing a message, I'm not really typing that message. I'm doing voice to text. So I have been using voice to text for many, many years, but I had never thought about doing it the way that Kevin J. Anderson describes it, which is recording your chapter. So literally doing what I do, but you're taking it to the next level where instead of sitting in front of your computer and dictating I'm still here at the desk when I do it. And I've talked about for years, and I'll get into this in a little bit. I've talked about for years how, I'm able to produce 3 to 4 times what I'm able to type in terms of the speed at which I can write, because for the most part, dictation software is pretty good about allowing you to just produce at a greater level. And Kevin J. Anderson talks about this. He's like, in terms of productivity, he's like, it's orders of magnitude. And he talks about how he's able to push out, 5, 6 novels a year, which is, literally, 4 or 5 times what he would be able to produce if he was sitting at a desk. And I've looked at that and go, okay, yeah, adding, if you consider the fact that you have a typist who's doing that work for you, absolutely. Now, since I don't use a typist and I'm still doing everything at my desk, I still have that element of I'm in it doing it. Now it's much faster than writing. His level, so as much as mine is 3 or 4 times faster than typing manually by hand, his version is 3 to 4 times faster than my version. And I just moved this screen over so I can actually. It looks like I'm looking at the screen now instead of looking over to the right. Sorry about that. I didn't have that placed this morning properly. Anyway, it's a great episode. That's up on Patreon. I would highly recommend you go take a look at that as well, if you're interested in productivity and writing. Now, I want to talk about a little bit here in this Monday Musings episode because that's what these episodes are all about. It's about random topics that I want to talk about for the week. Um, I got my start using dictation software because it was just so much faster than writing by hand. And when I first got going as a writer, I was doing a lot of very low quality work. I'm not proud of this work, but I also didn't put my name on it. So this is great because no one can ever point to it and say, you did this. And I can say, no, my name is Tim Anderson. And if you see here where it says TW Anderson, that name is on all of my professional work. So everything I've ever done professionally, it either says Tim Anderson or TW Anderson. But back when I was first getting going, I did a lot of work that was questionable in nature. And when I say questionable in nature, it was work that was done for content mills. So back in 2008 era, 2008, 9, 10, the last contract I did was at the end of 2010, beginning of 2011. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that kind of stuff here. Um, Content writing for content mills there was a time where SEO content was the only content that anybody cared about. And so there used to be websites like I think it was ehow.com. I don't even know if this place still exists. I wrote a lot of content for ehow.com, and it was a place. There was a website called Demand Studios, and I worked with them for 3 4 years, and they were a content mill, and the pay rate was not that great unless you could produce at the level that I was producing. I don't even remember the pay rate. I want to say it was like $10 to $15 per article, but you were writing these like 300 to 500 word pieces, um, and it wasn't high quality content. It was what I called McArticles, the McDonald's of the internet. You were writing these generic how-to documents, um, or information blurbs, for the internet. Now, I had a lot of colleagues who would complain that they were only making $7 to $10 an hour because they would pick one of these articles and it would take them 2 to 3 hours to write a 500 word article. And I looked at these and went, it's low quality trash. My name's not on it. I just want a paycheck. I'm going to crank these things out as quickly as I can. And so I figured out a system using dictation software where I could go in and I could do 5 or 6 of these articles in an hour. So 2,500 to 3,000 words an hour. Um, and you're getting paid 10, $15 a pop. So you crank 10 of these bad boys out, you're getting 60, $75 an hour for your time, and instead of the $7 to $10 an hour that a lot of people come at. In fact, I think the very first YouTube video I ever did, I don't even know if it's still out there in the universe or not. Uh, I did an ebook way, way back. I think it was the very first ebook I ever did was called How to Make a Minimum of $50 an Hour as a Content Writer for Content Mills. And I talked about this process and I did a YouTube video about this. This has got to be like 2009, 2010 when I did this project. And I actually did a video showing people how I use dictation software. But there was another trick to it, which was I was a third generation um, ceramic tile and natural stone contractor. That's the industry I grew up in, and I worked in that until I was 28 years old. So I had a lot of background in construction, and there was just a ton of that was eHow was there was a lot of stuff on eHow about construction. So it was like how to do plumbing, how to hang cabinets, how to you know do siding, roofing, all this other stuff. And even though I specialized in flooring, um, I also knew how to do all the other things because I just grew up in construction. I also grew up on a farm. I grew up on a dairy farm. So I just from the time I was 5, 6 years old, I'd always been involved in those types of things. And so I had a lot of experience, which allowed me to write about these things from firsthand knowledge, which made it easier for me. But I didn't only do those types of articles, and I'm going to give you some insight into how I was able to do what I did for a long time. Because remember, I wasn't putting my name on any of this stuff, so I would work on that stuff for 4 or 5 hours a day, make $200, $300 of content work, and then in the afternoons, this is when I was building my travel blog with my wife. So then in the afternoons, I would be working on the blog content and the YouTube content and everything else that we were doing for Marginal Boundaries, and also my work doing science fiction and fantasy and short stories and everything else. That was the stuff I was doing in the afternoons and evenings when it was working on me time. So, yes, doing a lot of construction articles and stuff like that. But the key was like, as an example, it wasn't just about writing fast. It was about finding batches of content that was all the same thing. So serpentine belts. There was, for example, I found a batch of articles one time on Demand Studios when I was working for them. There was a batch of articles, I want to say like 300 articles, that were all about how to change the serpentine belt in a car, but it was how to change the serpentine belt in all these different types of cars. So the theory is that they're just going to fill eHow with a bunch of SEO filled articles on how to change the serpentine belt in a Nissan Pathfinder, how to change the serpentine belt in a Ford Mustang, how to change the serpentine belt in a Toyota Corolla, blah, 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 blah. So the key is that, okay, it's all the same shit. You're just changing the name of the car and that's it. But otherwise, the process of changing the serpentine belt in a car is mostly the same. It is slightly different for per model. But basically what I did is I would pick a bunch of those articles and I wrote a template, which was how to change a serpentine belt in a car. That was the template. And then I would just copy and paste that and then modify it depending on what type of car it was. So you would change the model name, you would change the exact process would change slightly depending on where you needed to, lever up the the wheels, the flywheels for the serpentine belt. That would change slightly for each model, but all that information was available on the internet. So it would take me 5 minutes to find out how to do it in a Toyota Corolla, and then you just insert that, and then you do a quick. This is what they call a plagiarism check, but you do a quick check via software to make sure that you don't have duplicate content. So you need to make sure that the article is at least 80% original to pass Google's SEO algorithms. And then once that's done, you send it off. So I was spending, 10 minutes at most per article, and then cranking them out and sending them off. And like I said, getting paid $10, $15 a pop. So I'm doing 5 of these an hour. It was easy to make 60, $75 an hour working for these content mills. Another example, this is the last project that I did. At the end of 2010, beginning of 2011, this is when I met my wife. I got a big project from a British client that I'd done a lot of work for. And this is a client, by the way, I don't think they're still around. Maybe they are, but some of the coolest projects I worked on when I was getting going as a writer was through this company from England. Like they had me do. I remember one time I got a project to do. It was a website about the X Files, and so the client wanted someone to write episode reviews for the X Files. And so I literally got to sit there for like 6 months and rewatch the X Files and just write overviews of each episode. It was an amazing job. Another example was I got to do a website on um, Robin Hood, the various Robin Hood myths. So I got to go in and look at like the 8 or 10 different versions of Robin Hood and fill this website with content about Robin Hood and the various myths and linking back to the source material and all this other stuff. And then I did another website that was all about Texas no limit hold'em, and that project as a result led to me getting a PokerStars account. I think it was PokerStars, might still be around, and playing online poker for like 6 months. And I got reasonably good at online poker. I was making about $500 a month playing online poker as a research project for this website that was all about how to play Texas No Hold'em, or Texas No Limit, excuse me. I don't remember what it's called because I've been playing for years. So I mean, I got to do a lot of cool projects for this company, but there was also a lot of content crap that fell in between. And the project that I was working on when I met my wife was no, you know, it was no exception. It was about it was a $10,000 project basically, right around $10,000. And basically, I had to write hundreds. I don't remember how many hundreds. I think it was like 800 articles or something, 800 blurbs. But it was for a hotel website in the UK, and they wanted me to write these overview blurbs about these hotels throughout Europe. And the basic gist was like 300-word blurbs. It had to include, you know, name of the hotel, amenities of the hotel, place where the hotel was located, tourist attractions close to the hotel. And so I basically figured out, you know, I'd been doing this for a while now, so I wrote 5 templates, and then I used those templates to just copy and paste and then fill in the blanks with, you know, unique information for that hotel. And so what I would do is I would do about 12 of those. The goal was to do a minimum of 12 a day. Um, and then I would do that at my apartment. This is when I had first moved to Cancun. Um, I would do that during the day, and then, you know, at nights, because I wanted to get out of the apartment, I would go to this cafe that was just down the street a couple blocks, and I would edit at the cafe just so that I would have a change of environment, get some dinner, have a place to work. And that's where I met my wife, because my wife was working at the hotel, at that cafe, excuse me. El Pabilo is what it was called. Don't even know if it's still around, honestly. But anyway, that process, you know, uh, was me doing that. And it took me about 6 weeks to fulfill this $10,000 contract. It was the most mind-numbing, boring work I've ever done in my life. There's no, there's nothing fun about doing blurbs on hotels. And at that point, you're not, you know, you're just doing it for the paycheck is what you're doing it for. And there's a great, there's a great quote. I don't remember the exact quote by Stephen King where he talks about, you know, if you are getting a paycheck and you're able to pay a bill without paycheck, then you're a professional writer. And that's what I've always looked at and said, I don't really care about the quality of that type of work because my name's not on it. It's literally I'm ghostwriting for someone else. And it's not like I'm ghostwriting a novel. It's not like I'm ghostwriting a Star Wars novel, right? And I actually want that on my resume. It's ghostwriting low quality McArticle trash for the internet that's just there to hit the SEO markers that they want it to hit so that Google will put that article up in the top of their search engine when somebody searches for hotels in Europe. So I wasn't worried about the quality, but I was getting paid, you know. And as any writer knows, you know, if you can get a $10,000 paycheck for 6 weeks worth of work, that's a good project. That's a good contract. That's a good project. Especially when you look at sci-fi and fantasy and novel writing and short story. Oftentimes you don't get paid until publication. So to be able to get those kind of projects, I was getting 25% upfront, 25% at a milestone, and then the other 50% uh, when I completed the project. So it was a great way for me to travel the world and do what I like to do because I was always getting paid on those types of projects, getting an upfront chunk with a milestone payment and then the rest of it on completion. And Demand Studios work was easy because I was getting paid, I want to say I was getting paid twice a week through PayPal. So you know, between those two places, it was easy for me. You know, I averaged for many years doing content mill work. I would make $3,000 to $4,000 a month as a content writer, working about 4 hours a day was all I ever worked on all that content, and I pretty much never dropped below $50 an hour for the whole time that I did that. Now, for some people, that might sound like it's not a lot of money. For other people, it is a lot of money. Compared to what I was making when I was a contractor in construction, it was a lot less than I was making as a contractor. But I got to do it from the comfort of an air-conditioned apartment where I could sit there and drink wine, smoke weed, and not have to put on pants if I didn't want to, as opposed to going out there and dealing with the elements every single day like I had to do when I was working construction. So this is the long version of me saying I've been familiar with dictation software for a long time, and I've used it. I think I even a few years ago maybe showed when I was either I can't remember if I was working on a short story, what I was working on, but I think I did an episode on YouTube where I showed people how I use dictation software to write a short story. Because basically you're going in, and if I can use an example right now, and maybe I'll do another episode for Patreon um, this year. But basically, I don't use all the commands that you can use because you can go in there and use commands that are like, you know, open paragraph, close paragraph, new line, you know, period, comma, all that other stuff. You can do it to that level and be completely hands off. I do not. I actually go in and I use I have a system now where I do all the punctuation manually. Um, but I've developed this system where it's pretty organic. So if I could give you an example, um, we'll start with the quotation marks, and you just type that. You do your quotation mark. What do you think about today? Comma, quotation mark. He asked quietly, period. But I'm typing some of that, so it's like only some of it is dictated. If I had to estimate, I would say everything is dictated other than the punctuation. I'm still doing punctuation manually, and that's one of the things that was interesting about listening to Kevin Anderson talk about his process of dictating into the recorder and then handing off to the typist. He said, obviously the typist he's been using has been working with him for a while and knows basically where to put the punctuation. So he's actually not talking about, he's not actually recording comma. He says he might do it occasionally, but he says for the most part he just talks and the typist knows where to put the punctuation. But that also suggests that there's a shorthand communication between those two because they worked professionally for a while. Excuse me, I need a drink of my coffee. Anyway, on a given hour, when my hand is not acting up, I can do 2-3 thousand words in an hour typing if I'm in the flow and it's everything's going perfectly. But these days, I'm not 25 anymore, and I've played a lot of MMORPGs, and I was telling people the other day, squeezing sponges for 20 years just wrecked my hand, and so the reality of me doing 3,000 words, excuse me, an hour typing, it just, in my late 20s, early 30s, I could still do that. I cannot do that. If I do that one day, I I can't use my hand for a week. It hurts so bad. So those days are long behind me. So I've learned to use dictation software more frequently. And actually, I think Kevin J. Anderson was talking about this in his interview where he's talking about how his wife, Rebecca, I can't remember her last name off the top of my head, Moeta, maybe. Um, he was talking about how she had just over the years had just developed severe carpal tunnels and just had 4 different surgeries and just got to the point where she just couldn't, her ability to type at a reasonable pace was just basically destroyed just through, getting older and overuse and everything else. And so she just eventually got to the point where she has started using, dic- the dictation manner in which he uses. And I largely started using dictation software because it enabled me to do 4 or 5 times more than what my colleagues were doing and actually make, really good wage doing crap work. But over the years, as I've gotten older, I've started to use it more. And actually, the new sci-fi novel that I'm working on, it's entirely written um, through dictation software because these days I have a limit. I can do about 1,000 words a day manually. If I start going beyond 1,000 words a day, and if I do that for more than like 4 or 5 days in a row, I have to take a break with the hand. So I've just decided instead of even worrying about that and just not to aggravate it anymore, I'll answer emails and stuff, and I'll type some Discord messages. But for the most part, I do everything with dictation software these days when it comes to actual doing any sort of production work that's not social media or Discord or things of that nature. Um, I could do if I'm taking my time, I'll do 1,500 words, 1,500 to 2,000 words per hour is what I can do if everything is going good and I'm going perfectly. Um, you know, it also depends on the terminology if I'm dealing with a lot of sci-fi terminology and things of that nature. Um, but dictation software is also not perfect. So if I start talking too quickly, the software will mistake other words. It'll put things in there like the other day I was doing something and I was talking about lightning. Now my pronunciation is not perfect on that lightning, and if I talk quickly, it sounds like lighting. And so the microphone kept putting in lighting, even though I was saying lightning. So it was saying lighting, like the lighting on the ceiling, and I was saying lightning, the lightning in the sky, but it kept putting in lighting, and so I had to keep going back and fixing that. And that's stuff that usually I'll check all that when I go through and do the second draft, when I'm actually going in and doing, I'll catch some of it when I'm sitting here. Some of it I won't see until the second read through. And sometimes, and I've had people tell me that, Echoes of the Past, as an example, went through beta readers, alpha readers, and beta readers, and it still has, I've been told, I haven't gone back and checked it for a long time, but I've been told that there are still a couple of instances in Echoes of the Past where um, apparently there's a wrong word usage because the pronunciation is, you know, as an example, there. There's lots of versions of there. And I guess there's some examples of that type of scenarios even now in Echoes of the Past that still need to be fixed at some point. Um, so that's the only downside to using Dragon Naturally Speaking is the sense that there are instances where the microphone might pick up the wrong word or might misunderstand something. Anyway, but that's not to say that I do 1,500 words per hour reliably. You know, this is the first time I've done it exclusively when writing a book, and so I'm kind of learning a new process. Because previously I would do chunks um, of stories and books and stuff with dictation software, and I would still do a lot of it manually. This is the first time I'm doing it completely, so I'm still learning that process. But I'm moving right along that novel. I'm shooting to have that done by the end of March. Um, and I've been the last, I think, 6 or 7 days, I've been averaging um, like 15 to 1800 words per session. Now I'm typically sitting down for an hour and a half to 2 hours because that's what I've got carved out every single day for my writing is an hour and a half to 2 hours in between all the other stuff I'm working on. But starting this week, and today's actually January 25th is the first day that I'm supposed to do this, and I'm assuming I can carve this out. But I'm going to try to carve out 3 hour sessions, which is about double the time that I normally put into working on stuff per day in terms of writing. I'm going to try to do 3 hours per day starting this week. And I'm going to see what I can produce in 3 hour sessions over the course of this week, just as kind of an experiment. Because, obviously I have to worry that I have to, you know, I don't want the quality to suffer just because I'm trying to hit a word count, but I also want to see what I can produce if I'm sitting here for 3 hours a day as opposed to an hour and a half to 2 hours. Um, so that's starting today, and I'm going to try to see if I can't average like 3,000 words a day. I'm not going to be able to hit Kevin J. Anderson's 4,000 words a day mark at the moment because the way he does things is quite a bit differently. If I was doing it the way he was doing, no problem. But I'm not. So I'm using software as opposed to just dictating into a recorder. So my process is still somewhat linked to sitting here. And 3 hours without a break is about as much as I want to put my ass through. Um, but that's going to be the experiment this week. So this is turning into a longer episode of Monday Musings. These have usually been like 15, 20 minutes the last couple ones, and this one's already over 30 minutes, so I probably need to wrap up. And it's 5:30, which means I need to get on to other stuff. So anyway, um, that's my Monday Musings. This is the longer version of what I was talking about in the productivity and writing episode over on Patreon. I would highly recommend that you go check that interview out with Kevin D. Anderson. It's about 45 minutes long. Highly recommend it if you're interested in writing at all whatsoever. And of course, don't forget to check out the Patreon and pick up a subscription. Got some cool stuff going on there. We've obviously got the Lotro Cooking in Real Life series. I'm doing excerpts from the new novel that I'm working on. I don't want to give too much away. I think that novel I'm going to be shipping that to agents, or I'm going to attempt to ship it to agents. Everything I've done since starting my career in 2008 as a writer has either been self-published or I've done work for clients that's been on contract, but I've never actually submitted. I've never done any work through an agent or a traditional publisher. So I think I'm going to attempt to change that this year. I was like, screw it. I'm past 40 now. I've got enough of a track record and background that I think I should be able to, you know, be diligent enough and pick up an agent and get something through a traditional publisher. So I think, plus this novel is a little different in that I'm writing as a standalone novel with the option to have an ending that allows for a second novel to be written, but it doesn't necessarily have to be written. It's going to be one of those things where if I can sell it and it does well, then I might turn around and do a second one just to, wrap up that series. But I don't anticipate that turning into anything else unless it just blows up and, you know, it's, which I don't anticipate that happening. But let's say it did blow up, then I might turn around and be like, well, now I need to write five of them and just milk that money train all the way down the line. But at this point, it's being written as a standalone. But there's excerpts of that going up on Patreon along with everything else. The Lotro Cooking in Real Life series. I have another project that I'm going to be starting. Um, I've basically been spending the last few months outlining that project. That's going to be a Patreon exclusive, and that's coming. I'm anticipating that's going to be the project that I work on as soon as I wrap up the rough draft of this novel. So if I can wrap this up, at the end of February, early March, then I will be immediately going into the next project, which is going to be a Patreon exclusive. And you're going to want to stick around for that because it's fun. It's a brand new. I don't want to give too much about it away yet. Um, but that's going to be Patreon exclusive. So I would urge you start taking the time to look at the stuff that I produce here on YouTube and over on Patreon, the free stuff that I produce. Um, and if you like what you see there, consider picking up a subscription because I think it's worth it, especially considering the background of work that I've worked on over the last decade. If you've been following me for a while, if you haven't and you just stumbled upon me, check out the over description for what I've been working on. You can check out Marginal Boundaries, where my wife and I used to work, work that I did um, over at on the Saga of Leucemia, so on and so forth, uh, and beyond. A lot of fun stuff coming on the pipeline. If you haven't already done so, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so that you get updates when new content is available, and more importantly, stick around, join the Discord. All the links are below. Follow on social media, and we will see everybody in the next episode, which will be something. I'm streaming Lotro with my brother on Mondays and Thursday nights. I recorded the most recent episode of Lotro Cooking in Real Life series last week. We did Feast of Rohan. I think I actually recorded that yesterday, um, or the day before. I forget. That won't be coming out this week, but probably next week. But I've got some more stuff coming to Patreon this week, and we've obviously got more Lotro videos, and people have requested that I do some more Assassin's Creed Valhalla videos for YouTube, so I may be doing that. Still haven't beat the game. And Cyberpunk 2077's got the latest patches out, so I might actually test that and see if I want to stream some of that because I didn't before because of all the bugs. But we'll see how that goes. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to my Monday musings, and I'll see everybody next time. Cheers.